Hello and welcome to From to Trauma to CEO. Today's conversation is one that I'm actually genuinely been looking forward to because it lives in a space that I care very deeply about. And it's a space between healing meets expansion and where the inner work begins to shape how an individual leads her life, their business, and their creativity. And most importantly, I'm joined by a very, very dear friend of mine that I have a lot of love for. So I'm joined by Renee Bowen, who is a trauma informed coach, photographer, and a podcast host who has helped visionary women heal at the root and embody their next evolution in life and also in their business and in everything that they do. So she blends her degree in psychology and certificate in NLP, hypnosis, and so everything amazing. She also integrates neuroscience, energetic, and subconscious reprogramming to create deep and lasting transformation. And with a photographer's eyes and a healer's heart, she guides every creative woman to dissolve all pattern, regulate their nervous system, and reconnect with their authentic self. As a host of Tried and True with a dash of woo, which by the way, I love that name, Renee brings her signature mix of practicality and magic to conversations about mindset, manifestation, conscious entrepreneurship. So everything that's just very close to my heart. Her work invites women to expand beyond surface level strategy and into full energetic embodiment where business, creativity, and personal evolution becomes one aligned expression. So thank you so much for being here, Renee. And I want to welcome you officially first, but also just tell you how excited I am that we are speaking. Just generally that I'm speaking with you because I love just talking to you, but also that people are going to be hearing about your magic also.
Thank you so much. I am thrilled to be on your podcast. I love it.
Great. So as we started talking about embodiment. I mean, that is a word that I know that it gets used widely, and it's not always a true representation of the work that is being carried out. So in your work, I know the embodiment plays a very big part in everything that you do. So, and usually when embodiment happens, especially when we are entering the next evolution or next stage of growth, there is a shift that takes place. So I wanted to hear from you about kind of your experience with working with women who are going to go through this embodiment and then that shift that takes place, and just tell us a little bit about what that shift is about and what it is that you see as a result of individuals kind of embodying their next level.
Yeah. Well, I think that part of it for me with the embodiment aspect is I think it goes back to in another life, I was a massage therapist like years and years ago. After I got my bachelor's in psychology, I fully intended to go and get that master's, and then life took various turns as it does. So I found myself in Los Angeles and I was drawn to body work, and I went to a very woo woo, like new agey, massage therapy school back in the 90s. And it was there that I started to really kind of get that whole aspect, right? Because like I love psychology. I've loved it since I was a teenager. And, the inner workings of like what makes us tick and what makes us do the things that we want, that we do. And then it was in massage therapy school that I started realizing, oh, we live in our bodies. This is all connected here. And like how we can actually integrate that. So, it was one of the things that I wanted to even explore back then before somatic therapy was ever really kind of a thing. I was starting to experiment with some of that just in my own like energy work. 'Cause I'm also certified in Reiki and all of this other kind of stuff. So fast forward now, basically what that means for me is that It's about coming back home to ourselves, because most of us, high achieving women, especially myself included, we sort of live up here, right? Like we live in our head. And what that saying is, if you're in your head, you're dead, right? Because it's the spinning and the spinning and the spinning. And it's like, okay,
Yeah.
let's integrate it and like get it back down into the body, because that is where we live. And that is where a lot of this trauma or programming or whatever will show up, sometimes in illness, sometimes
Mhm.
not, but it can show up in various ways. So that word embodiment for me really means acknowledging and like getting to the root of what's really going on under the surface in your unconscious mind, so that you can then integrate it, get it into the nervous system, and regulate at the nervous system level so that you can get what you want out of life.
Well, I mean, it's obviously a no-brainer as to why me and you would become friends, and that everything to do with, because I know that your work is actually one of, I mean, I know some coaches and I work with some. You're one of a very few that is trauma informed and actually works specifically, not just with the mindset, but, works on all different levels. I want to understand, because although I'm just trying to think if we've ever had this conversation before or not, so I'm actually curious as well myself. That what led you to understand that trauma, or kind of embody that trauma informed coaching, or the way that you help people being trauma informed, is a necessity, and it's something that is absolutely important for any shift to take place. I know that that's not how a lot of uh, coaches work, or the traditional coaching industry is not necessarily trauma informed, or they don't really talk about that as much. So I wonder, like, where that came from for you. And I know that you had you've gone through your own process. So I'm curious to hear how, trauma informed coaching became a central part of what you do.
Yeah, I think that for me, I always say that I fell into coaching, right? Like I didn't mean to become a coach. I was a photographer after my massage therapy days. I followed that creative urge that I had to become a photographer. And I really loved it. And it has been great for me. And then about like 10 years in, people started asking me, well, how are you doing what you're doing? How are you making so much money at it? All of these things. So it was like this natural sort of like evolution into mentoring. I called it mentoring at that point, right? Because I
Mhm.
was just kind of teaching people how I did what I did. But it
Yeah.
became very clear to me very quickly that they weren't coming to me just for that, right? Like I was telling them the roadmap. I'm like, here it is. Like I did this, do this is how you do this, but they weren't doing it. And so that triggered that first love of psychology for me. Really, that's what it was. It was like, you know, I loved psychology, but I also was in therapy at a young age, and I saw the results of that in my own personal life. And I was always a big believer in it. And so it made me start thinking, okay, well, what's holding them back, right? Like these women, especially,
Mhm.
were coming to me wanting to change, wanting to have these businesses, wanting to raise their prices. That was the big, big, big trigger. They wanted to raise their prices. How are you making so much money as a photographer? And I was like, well, I had to do a lot of inner work. I mean, like when I had to look at my pricing, that took me back to my own trauma of my dad leaving when I was 7 and never paying child support. I didn't even think I had money issues, my whole
Mhm.
life. I was like, it's fine. Money's whatever. Like I didn't think I had any charged up emotions about it until I started to have to ask people to pay me as a business owner. And that's when I had to do my own inner work and realize, oh, this is all so connected to my worth, right? So it
Mhm.
was in my own work that I did on my own that I started realizing that's really this deeper piece of it. There's a lot of unconscious programming that they're coming in with. And unless we figure out what's going on at the root, no amount of strategy is ever going to work, because you're not going to do it. You're going to get too charged up about it. Your unconscious mind's going to fire up, and it's going to stop you from getting what you want. So that's why I had to take a pause and realize, well, what I'm really doing here is trauma work. in essence,
Mhm.
and it felt weird because like I don't have that master's, right? Like who am I? Right? I had my own imposter stuff pop up. Who am I to call myself trauma informed? But I went back and got certifications, and I dug back into some other trainings that I felt like were going to really help support them in a better way, in a deeper way. And I just didn't expect to love it as much as I do. It's like my favorite thing ever.
It is. It's very interesting because when you start to look at these, I guess, deeper issues, you always start with yourself, right? So I always say, in order to be able to get somebody or take somebody to a place, you should have gone there yourself. So, in order to guide somebody else through that process. And I guess, a big part of, because you mentioned earlier that your mom was at the time, going to therapy wasn't a huge thing, right? But your mom actually put you in therapy at a kind of a younger age. And I feel like that sets a big foundation for how you understand yourself and then moving on. Because, you've obviously built a successful career for yourself, and you identified a lot of the programming and a lot of the traumas that you had struggled with before, without really naming it trauma as such, when without necessarily knowing, okay, this is what it is. But you managed to dive into it, and a lot of stuff came up, and as a result of that, you are now kind of guiding women through that process as well. I mean, that's extraordinary. That's exactly the heart of everything that we are talking about right here. So I want to know, like, at what stage did you, I mean, as we go through life and business and expansion and success, we outgrow different identities, right? So just curious to know, like, when was the first time you consciously decided that actually this identity or that's linked to my old programming is not serving me anymore? And then you made a conscious, because obviously you did. That's why you managed to expand and still expanding. So I'm just curious to know whether you have any memory of the time where you thought, okay, this identity, this is not working. I need to upgrade something internally.
I mean, honestly, I feel like that's happened so many times in my
Yeah,
life.
that's what I
It,
said. Yeah.
it's like how many? They all just sort of like flooded in just now. I
Mm.
mean, probably the first time that I that is very was very impactful, like really truly pivotal in my life, was when I decided to just leave everything I knew, including my entire family, pick up and leave at 25 years old, and come to Los Angeles. I was born and raised in the deep South, and I was the oldest daughter, the oldest grandchild. You know, I got that eldest daughter programming, and I had graduated college and things were okay. And I had this really toxic relationship, right? So
Mhm.
lots of daddy issues there that I was working through with a therapist at the time. And yes, I'm very grateful that my mom put me in therapy and introduced it to me at a young age, and that I actually enjoyed it, because I do think that was like a huge key in me becoming self-aware enough to understand kind of what was going on there. I probably would never have done this had I not been in therapy, right? So I literally just kind of picked up and left. I was 25. I had no job, no plan, nothing. And I knew, though, I knew in my soul, if I stayed, I would never get to that next place. I didn't even know what that next place was. I didn't really know what I
Mm.
was going there for, what I was coming here for. I just knew that I had to get out of where I was, like physically, mentally, everything. I just felt this urge. And I don't know if you can call it a download. Like, I'm very woo woo, but like, I just really just felt like I needed to listen to that inner
Mm.
little voice that was saying that. So that's kind of when my life really opened up the first time. You talk about putting yourself in a very uncomfortable, strange situation. I moved across country with two dogs, no money, no job, and I had to get on my feet very quickly. And I did. And it also built incredible resilience because and self-trust because I knew I got this. I can do this. And so
Mhm.
every little step of the way, there were many other times after that. Definitely what I just mentioned earlier about having to raise prices, having to, I was drawn to a creative business as most creatives are. You're good at something naturally and you say, oh, I can just make money at this, right?
Mm.
And then you realize, oh my God, I have to learn how to run a business. And that triggers us into all kind of different levels. And so it was at that point that I realized, well, I can stay where I am and just keep charging very little for this and kill myself to, just give and give and give away my art and not get any energetic exchange back. Or I can get real uncomfortable and look at why I want to throw up when I ask people for money because that was a very, very big trigger for me. And now it's my favorite thing ever. I love sales sessions because I don't see it in the same way and I know where it's coming from. And yeah, there was healing there, but it was also repatterning, you know?
Yes, yes, absolutely. I mean, the part that you said, one part that really kind of stayed with me is how you're talking about moving away from home and everything, I really want to know what do you think contributed to you being able to sit with uncertainty, in a way that you did? Because I mean, that's the thing. When we are uncertain about where we're going or what's going to happen next, that's when, our nervous system picks that up as a threat because it's unfamiliar and we love to be in control because that gives us a sense of what I call a lot of the times false safety because, it's a false sense of control. But nevertheless, that's where people get really uncomfortable or sometimes they don't follow through. Where do you think you got your tolerance, I guess, for uncertainty, and how do you think it served you? Obviously, in that capacity it did, but in any other way, especially as you were expanding and you were having more and more success.
It's a great question because I think that it's probably a few factors. Yeah, my parents divorced when I was really young, but my mom always had my back. And I feel like that is a privilege to have, and I recognize that. A lot of people do not have that. My mom had me very young. She had me at 17. And I mean, like she found out she was pregnant on a Friday. She was married by Monday. She didn't
Mm.
have a choice, right? So
Yeah.
it was, but I was never made to feel that way
Mhm.
ever. So while I had my own issues going on, with my father and things like that, I always had this knowing that I was going to be taken care of, that I was going to be okay because I was very much loved. Obviously, we all have our stuff. I mean, I was raised in the 70s. They didn't know where I was half the time. But all that to say, I did feel supported. And I think that that has a lot to do with the confidence I had as a child and also as a teenager. I was that teenager too in high school who I never felt like I really fit in. I
Mm.
always felt a little bit on the outskirts of every group. I was friends with everybody and sort of like knew everybody, but I never felt like anyone really got me. I was also raised extremely religious. I went to Catholic school for 13 years and I was always the kid questioning it. Why?
Mhm.
Why is this? Why is this? And so I don't know. I'm an INTJ. That probably has something to do with it. I was always very, button pushing sort of kid. And I wanted to know. I had like critical thinking skills, and my mom encouraged me to. So by the time I got to that point of like that decision to leave, I had been working since I was
Mhm.
16 years old. I knew that I could find a job anywhere if I had a degree, but like even if I could go find a job waiting tables, I could go find a job doing this. I just had this knowing that I was going to figure it out. And I think that was probably built, like I said, from a young age, the way that I was raised, but also every step that I took along the way also reinforced that in my nervous system that it was going to be okay because I believed it,
Wow.
and I think that's a
You
big
know
piece.
what stands out for me is it's amazing because what stands out for me is how, firstly, you, despite the fact that there were turbulences growing up, you did have one solid foundation and that was your mom. And regardless of, sometimes they would have made a mistake or anything, obviously, as you said, this was a different time, but you knew that the foundation was solid for you. And that kind of gave you the kind of that root, I guess. But also, I feel like your environment, going to the Catholic school, feeling like you don't belong in school and with friends at times, that kind of really was another layer of a foundation for you to build resilience, because obviously you had to kind of get through stuff and figure things out, right? But what stands out for me the most is how you were very committed to your intuition, to your inner knowing, despite the things that were going on around you. And I mean, this is the part where fear, a lot of the times, and our programming gets in a way. So we don't actually hear ourselves, and we don't hear uh, the things that our abilities, the things that we are supposed to be doing, and we start abandoning them. So I'm again curious to know what do you think contributed, I guess, to you, and what evidence did you have growing up or at any stage that your intuition was going to, that you need to trust your intuition?
I don't know if I ever even really called it that until I was probably well into my 20s, you know?
Mm,
I don't think it was something that I really knew to name
mhm,
that, but I always felt I was just kind of a weird kid, honestly. Like, like I remember sitting outside. I grew up in the middle of nowhere as well. That, I had like very rural upbringing, and I read a lot of books. And I read this book when I was a kid called Silver Eyes, and it was about this little girl who was psychic, and I then became obsessed with being psychic. And so I remember just sitting outside thinking that I could make the wind blow and all of this stuff. And I was always really, really interested in all things supernatural and metaphysical. I didn't know to name it that either, but like I was always really interested in the what if and what else is there. Like I said, I was very inquisitive. And because I was, a very voracious reader, I had access to the library. So I spent a lot
mm.
of time there. I think that that was a really big piece of it opening my mind because I wasn't raised that way. Again, like no one in my family, I was the black sheep in that essence, right? Like
This
I
is
love my
sorry.
family.
This is what I wanted to ask you. Was there were you was your intuition, I guess, or you trusting your inner knowing, was that celebrated in your household, or was it something that you were punished for or discouraged?
It's interesting because like my mom's one of 10 kids and there's six women in her family and they're all, all my aunts. And because she had me so young, I was kind of like the 11th kid in that family. And my grandmother was very matriarchal as well. So the women in my family very strong women. And it wasn't celebrated. I'm not going to say it was celebrated, but it wasn't punished. And that was the interesting piece is that, oh, that's Renee. You know what I mean? It was like whenever I
Mm,
would just come in and be like with my weird, crazy ideas, they would listen,
mhm.
and sometimes they might challenge me, but I never ever got shut down with it.
Yes.
And that was a big
That's
piece.
yeah. That is a big piece, because a lot of the times, what we carry in, as you know, and this is the work that you do, that we carry our whatever we pick up, at a younger age, into our lives today, and that becomes our reality. So that's why I was fascinated to hear that. I don't really hear a lot of women saying that I actually really trust my intuition, so much so that I'm going to just pack, and up and leave and start a whole new chapter. But it also does sound like it wasn't something that was ever dismissed, so you had the safety and a space to play around with your intuition, play around, read different things, and be interested in things without that, without being shamed for it. So then you internalized and you managed to kind of grow with that.
Yeah, and I think it also has something to do with, even though it wasn't spoken to me, in words. I think I just am a very intuitive person. But
Mhm.
as a kid, I knew, I had a knowing that my mom had me young. I knew that she had to give up a lot to
Mm.
have me. Like she couldn't go to college. She couldn't do a lot of things because I was there. And yes, she had the help of her family to raise me, which was a blessing. And I loved that as well. Like I literally was raised by a village because she was working a lot. And but there was this knowing, I think, of almost that programming of that I internalized as I owe it to her to do more.
Mm.
You see what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
like I didn't even see that until I was in my 20s, like maybe even my 30s, where I was like, "Oh, okay. Yeah, like she never ever put that on me." And it was always very much like you do you. I will help support whatever your dream is, but I think that there was always something deep inside of me that was like, "Well, I can and I should."
Mhm. Mhm.
That kind of thing. Yeah.
Mhm. So would you say, now that this just came up for me, would you say up until then and until you had that kind of like real awareness, would you say that your drive was trauma led?
Hmm. Oh yeah. Well,
And
yeah.
because you move to reparative success, and this is what we talk about, right? And this is why you move to reparative success, and then you build a whole kind of business around it. And now that's the work that you do also with clients. So it's because I never knew that that was the part where, as I knew, because obviously I know other aspects of your life. I just wasn't aware that that's where the kind of the main drive for you to begin with. It wasn't all to do with desire and all of that, but it was also coming from a place of a little bit of a responsibility, and a commitment to, um, I guess maybe that's not the right word, but repay, whatever she's done for you as well.
Yes, exactly. And it
Mm.
wasn't spoken or ever expected. It was just something I internalized in that way because that's what you do, right? That's what the
Mhm.
unconscious mind does. It was a piece of that. And it was probably a piece of, my not having a father present there as well to, the chasing of that sort of thing. Um, I think it definitely all came into play for sure. And that's why that identity piece is so important because I moved to LA when I was 25, and then within 3 years, I was married with one child and two on the way. Like everything
Mhm.
happened fast for me at that point. Like literally, it was like, oh, here you go. Like life is starting now. And then I found myself really after the twins, I had major postpartum. Like my hormones were just off the charts crazy. And, they were about a year old. My older son was 3, just getting diagnosed with autism. That's when everything sort of like just tumbled for me.
Mhm.
That was a huge identity shift for me because I didn't really know who I was outside of like now I was a mom of 3 little kids and it was it was shocking. It was really traumatic,
Mhm.
honestly, to go that quickly because I didn't plan that. It just sort
Yeah.
of happened. So I feel like this identity piece continues to come up for so many of us. I can
Mhm.
definitely see it in my own life, and I had to learn how to sit with that as well. That was a really hard time for me to listen to my intuition. It was hard. That's what I had to relearn.
And how do you think this is? What are your thoughts around how your intuition is now, and you committing to your intuition or your inner knowing or whatever people want to call it, self confidence or whatever? How do you think that's impacting your work with your clients today? Does it come up a lot, or do you see that that's the part that, are there lots of people that are struggling with it, and how does your intuition serve you in this work?
Yeah. Well, I really do believe that we're mirrors, right? Like whatever's going to show up for us is it's coming up for a reason.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I'm a big believer in that. And so that's always kind of been a through line for me is that just, okay, if something's coming up, then there's a reason either that I need to look at it or I'm able to help this person. And so the women that I'm seeing coming into my coaching now, especially, even I would say in the last like probably 4 years, but specifically in the last like 18 months, they are all dealing with some level of this. Most of them are sort of in that 40 to 50-ish range, and their kids are leaving. There's space now, like the kids are growing up, there's space in their relationship,
Mhm.
and they started a business maybe, or they thought about starting a business, but then they put everything on the back burner because they wanted to be there for their family, which is amazing. But now they're finding themselves thinking that they want to do it again, but
Mhm.
everything is rearing back up, that old all the fears, the unconscious
Yeah.
programming, the you can't do it, you're too old, nobody wants this, blah blah blah. All of that is like really loud for them right now. And so I find that, like not only am I seeing that in them, I know what that feels like.
Mhm.
I mean,
Mhm.
I'm 55 and I have no plan to stop what I'm doing anytime soon, but like there's still things that I want to do that are very different. I want to write a book. Of course,
Mhm.
that next level scares the crap out of me too, but that's why we continue also to work with our own coaches and do our own personal growth, which I think is huge. You have to be able to walk the walk.
You have to be able to walk the walk. That's that's definitely true. So, in your experience of obviously working with lots of people, and I know that we've exchanged notes many times before around this kind of work. What are some of the? I mean, you've mentioned that um, a lot of the self doubt and being identifying so much with the old identity, identifying so much with programming comes up, right? And how are you able to kind of, because I know that your work is coaching and then you're also very trauma informed. How do you integrate these two together? Because that's the heart of essentially everything that I'm talking about. How entrepreneurship and anything to do with high achievers wanting to expand or succeed. Yes, there are the strategy parts that we need to know, but as you know, like information, I always say, is so accessible these days that you can almost self-educate yourself to learn about the ins and outs of a business and a strategy and all of that. But then what then prevents people is something else. In Is this something that you kept kind of coming face to face with, and what shape or what does it look like? Because a lot of the times people don't identify it with, oh, this is the unconscious programming, or oh, this is a trauma. I mean, we've talked about the definition of trauma and how people are at times uncomfortable with it, or it's not, it's sometimes misrepresented. But how does this come up? How does this come up in a way that, and how do you pick that up and go, okay, this is the kind of work that requires deeper intervention?
Yeah. Well, so most of my one-on-one clients will come to me because they want help with both, right? And
Mm.
that's kind of why that's what the name of my podcast is all about, tried and true with a dash of woo. Because we need both. We need strategy and we need
Yes.
all the woo, or whatever you want to call it. It's neuroscience at the end of the day. But it's about the integration of those, but also, I mean, like marketing is like my love language. I can talk about marketing all day, every day. It's like one of my favorite things. I also have a very spicy creative brain. Most of my clients do. Most of us have some sort of undiagnosed ADHD, and that's another layer to all of this stuff on top of the trauma work and everything like that. And so it's not just about, like I said, most of these women are not coming to me just for this transformational unconscious reprogramming,
Of
right?
course. Yeah.
They're coming because they don't know who they are anymore. They want to figure out how to make this business work. They want to figure out how to regulate themselves enough to get their to-do list done because they go off on a side quest every time they open their computer. Like there's all these other little different pieces that'll show up, but really at the heart of it is that, okay, well, we need to kind of like dig into what's really going on there. So that's that trauma piece, is like the I'm not a therapist, so it's not like therapy work per se, but a lot of my clients will say that, this kind of felt like therapy. I'm like, I know, because we have to sort of like get to that nugget so we can kind of look at it with neutrality, without judgment. We're not beating ourselves up about it, but we're going to look at it and just sort of like understand what's going on so that we can then create safety in the nervous system, because this baseline feels like it's safe now. That's the loop you're running. So if this is the life you want, this is the business you want, we have to just sort of like transfer that safety over here. We do that with hypnosis, with all kind of different regulation techniques. There's a lot of different ways. Everybody's different. What works for one person may not work exactly for the other.
Yeah.
But I do believe that the one-on-one work is really beneficial. And that's why I still love doing it, because even just on a 1 hour Zoom, we can, as you know, we can
Yeah.
get to a lot of stuff. And they have me on Voxer, so a lot of this is about this accountability as well, and staying. And, my containers are a minimum of 3 months. I really prefer 6. It depends on the person. But that's where I feel like that actual transformation can happen,
Yes.
because I just want to meet them where they are. It's not a
Mhm.
one size fits all. It really isn't.
No, and you're doing the real work behind the also coaching and strategizing and everything else. And it's so, I think that's, I keep saying, but that is one of the main reasons as to why we managed to kind of, at first conversation, we were speaking the same language, because you're you've been a business owner for many many years, and you've done a lot. You went through different stages, and you managed to kind of build a successful business, a successful marriage, and you have a beautiful family life. And yes, we get tired every now and again, but generally you manage to create something that is going to be more sustainable for you moving forward. And of course, the work has to continue as we go along, because every layer of expansion requires another layer of, untangling ourselves from the old, obviously, programming. So I mean, for me, and then you've not only have you done that for yourself, you managed to kind of bring it into your work. And that's what makes your work, in my opinion, and how I see it, so much, very, very valuable, but also long lasting, because it's not something, and, that is just focusing on this on the surface, issues or strategies or even mindset hacks. You understand the complexity of who we are as human beings, and you've done an amazing job in your own life, but also in impacting lives of so many people, and in their growth, in their expansion. And when I talk about the integration of these two worlds, I always have you in mind, because you are a true representation of how coaching and the inner work and the trauma work should all come hand in hand. Because if somebody is to um, receive any kind of help in their expansion, in their success, it's never going to be sustainable if some form of inner work is not applied. And that is my experience over the 23 years that I've been working with people. This constantly comes up. So, I just want to kind of share with you, that already, but share with you how much I appreciate your work, and how much I appreciate the impact that you are having on people, and all the, seeds that you're planting.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot coming from you. I truly, really, really, truly, it does.
Is there, do you want to actually, for people that are listening and want to know how they can kind of, in what capacity, because I know you said you prefer one to one, but what are some of the work that you do, and what are some of the things that you can help them untangle and work through, especially with all the, especially when it's to do with like more creative businesses, and creative people that want to maybe step into business, or entrepreneurship, or they want to scale and expand what they've already created. How can they, what can you help them with?
Well, yeah, it just depends on kind of where they're at. I'm like I said, I mostly work with creatives in general. That's a broad term, but any business owner who feels stuck, really, anybody who feels like you said, either can't get to that next level, has some sort of issues with that old programming rearing up when they do even think about wanting to have bigger, better, more. If they feel triggered by things like that, if they feel like they are scattered and they have this really big dream on their heart and it's not
Mhm.
going anywhere, and they know that it's going to take some effort, so they want to have, to walk through that. So yeah, I do work one-on-one, but I also have a private podcast called Calibrate that has some really great, it's where I put a lot of my hypnosis tracks and things like that. It's a great place for people to start if they are
Wow,
just
yes, I think we had this conversation before. Before I even met you, I had listened to your your that
right.
podcast, and I had listened to some of your meditation and hypnosis. And when I first spoke to you, I was saying, "Oh, hold on, you sound so familiar to me."
Yeah, I
They are great. They're amazing.
thank you. And yeah, I add to it. It's like one of those things where I'll just, I add to it over time. And there's different like topics. I like hypnosis. I love meditation in general, but I like hypnosis because it's sort of, I call it like a gateway drug for people, because a lot of
Yeah.
people with very active brains have a hard time with meditation because they feel like they can't quiet like the inner, the
Yes.
dialogue, right? And I get it. I've got a very, very active inner
Yeah.
voice. And so it does take some practice. But hypnosis is a little different because, like I tell my clients, you don't really have to pay attention. I'm speaking to your unconscious mind. You
Mhm.
can just, it's really just like, you know, being relaxed. You don't have to like
Yeah.
necessarily follow the meditation. Let your mind kind of go off and do what it's going to do. Like going into trance is a very natural state for us. It just is.
Yeah.
And so I lay my hypnosis tracks over binaural beats as well, because I love binaural beats. And I think that's like such a cool brain hack to like even just get you regulated in your body. And so you're kind of getting a double whammy with my tracks. And so that's a really good place for people to start and just to even think about like opening up to any of this. But what that looks like is very, as far as like the container of coaching, it's very specific to what their goal is, right? Like, so
Mhm.
some people come to me, they want to build that business from start to finish. So they need that first, marketing plan, or they want to raise their prices in particular, or maybe they're stuck on this one thing. Some people come to me and they don't even have the idea. They're just, this has been in my heart for 20 years. I don't know how to even get moving, right?
Yeah.
So whatever it is, we start at the beginning, and I always start with people in their purpose work. And I go
Mhm.
deep into purpose work because it's not about what you do as a photographer or as a therapist. It's about who you are, right? You've been
Yeah.
living your purpose, but we're going to take out our highlighter and we're going to highlight it. We're going to create that through line, because without that connection, without your deep connection to it, all your marketing is going to feel super scattered. You're not going to know exactly what you're doing, who you're talking to, what to even do. So we got to get you really connected. And in that purpose work is the trauma work.
I love that, of course, and yeah, this is the kind of the heart of everything that is related to expansion and success. And so it's beautifully put by you, integrating the strategy, but then um, almost customizing it, right, to their needs and their programming. And this is amazing. And of course, I'll leave all your details in the show's notes so people can
Yeah,
um,
my podcast that you are going to be on as well, my regular podcast. So
oh yes.
that's great for people to come hang out too. Yeah.
Absolutely. So we can, yeah, so people can actually reach you and listen to your podcast, but also maybe check out the private podcast and see how they can kind of work with you, or how they can access some of your magic, because it is magic. And I wish that more and more people would, engage with this kind of work. And even as, whether as coaches, but also as in a business growth or in that space, I wish that there would be more and more conversations like this. So I really appreciate you and your time. And it's always a pleasure speaking with you. But thank you so much for coming on today and sharing with us your journey and, well, your journey of success, but also the amazing work that you do.
Thank you. Thank you for the work that you do as well. And thank you for your podcast, because it is truly a gift and I'm honored to be here. So thank you.
Okay, so that's it for today. And we will be back again with another episode very soon.